I'm Aisha Hussain. I'm the Features Editor at Legal Cheek, and I'll be your chair for Session 3, Pathways for Professional Development and Competence through the SQE, running until 12:25 p.m. So under the new, more flexible training regime, in-house legal teams are likely to play a bigger role in the training of lawyers in the future. And joining me to give their takes on what these new training models will look like, we have Dr. Giles Proctor, Chief Executive Officer of the College of Legal Practice, Bhavisha Mistry, General Counsel at pharma company Mawdsleys, Susan Cooper, Founder and CEO of Accutrainee, and Dan Kayne, General Counsel, Regions at Network Rail and founder of the O-Shaped Lawyer Project. Hello to you all.
Hi. Hello there.
So I'm going to invite each speaker to deliver a short talk before we come together for a Q&A that I will be chairing, featuring a selection of your questions. And you can leave your questions in the chat sidebar under the Q&A tab. So I'm going to hand over to Giles to begin his talk. And if the rest of the speakers could now drop off the stage. Brilliant. Over to you, Giles.
Thanks, Aisha, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Just to introduce the college to you, we're a provider of virtual legal training, which is practitioner designed and practitioner focused. We design competency-based programs for all levels of practitioners, from future trainee to senior partner. Our focus around SQE is about offering wider access to the profession and the benefits of flexible delivery of SQE training. So like other providers, we've been talking to many in-house teams and law firms who are contemplating SQE and what it means. They're starting to look beyond the first SQE exam in November 2021 and looking at certainly the type of training they want for their future employees. Not an easy change for many. There's lots of thinking going on about the shape of what this might look like. So I thought for this short introductory talk, I could share a little of what we have taken from those conversations with employers. Our conversations have usually focused around the following issues: the shape and timing of a new training proposition for SQE for that employer, as you'd expect, given the phasing of the examinations and also the timetable that's now emerging from the SRA. I think also in those conversations, we've been seeing how SQE is giving the opportunity to reflect on and change what happens currently in delivery of training, who can qualify through the route, etc., etc. I think thirdly, a theme of the conversations is how the pandemic has led to a focus on the economics of training and on the acceptance of more virtual interactions rather than a pure face-to-face model for training. I suppose my last point on this is, rather than accepting now a one-size-fits-all model, employers are consulting on a number of models and driving that conversation. It demonstrates really to me how SQE is encouraging proactivity in training and development. I've chosen 3 examples to share with you from the conversations we're having. Firstly, what I call the front-loading model. The aim of this is where employers seek to put their future trainees through the SQE1 and SQE2 preparation courses and complete the SQE1 and SQE2 exams successfully before their future trainees start the qualifying work experience. Employers may also choose to have future trainees study additional modules on a full-time basis, and those are comparable to the current LPC electives. This model closely reflects the current LPC provision, where the employer does not involve the future trainee in working in the employer's offices before the exams are completed, and there's no earn while you learn element here. For employers, 2 considerations crop up frequently. Firstly, costs. These should drop significantly with the SQE. There's no justification for charging the same level of fees for a full-time LPC as a full-time LPC, and this is highlighted especially now when employers' training budgets are stretched. And secondly, this links to a genuine wish we're seeing by employers to provide more opportunities for accessing the profession. Otherwise, you maintain a glass ceiling on costs that's been in place for many years and does help prevent access. However, there's a structural issue about front-loading the SQE training before QWE. Employers have to work with the SQE exam timetable to make timings work for getting future trainees through the SQE prior to the qualifying work experience starting. The next model we're exploring is the integrated model. And that's where, once again, employers seek to put their future trainees through SQE1 and SQE2 prior to QWE. The difference here is that employers also integrate periods of study with periods of working in the employer's organisation, where the future trainees work in both non-fee earning and fee earning departments. Now, this is, I think, a forward-thinking model. It provides a very effective induction into the employer pre-QWE for the future trainee, with perhaps specialist modules that link into key practice areas. This will upskill future trainees and also introduce them to competencies, how those drive development, for example, within the firm. This training will assist them once they start their QWE, and perhaps it might be wrapped up in a diploma or master's award, should the employer so choose. I suppose two more things about this integrated model. Future trainees may actually join the employer sooner under this model than in the previous model, the front-loading model. And secondly, this model may well prove to give best value for the employers in terms of addressing future turnover and retention. Finally, the last model that we're picking up on is this earn while you learn route. We're getting inquiries at the moment from overseas lawyers, for example, or paralegals in particular, who are working at the moment in firms or organisations. And they, or their employer, are wanting them to progress through the SQE1 and SQE2 in a mix of full-time and part-time preparation courses, and completing SQE1 and SQE2 to their own timetable. So this means that actually the learner may be completing some of the examinations while they're in their QWE. Now, this model facilitates access to qualification for those future solicitors who require flexibility due to domestic arrangements or the need for part-time study. And again, the attraction of this particular model is both flexibility and also cost, especially if it's individual paying their way through. They will get access to the SQE1 and SQE2 preparation courses for, say, just over £4,000 providers like ourselves, compared to LPCs, which have traditionally cost significantly more, and up to £15,000, in fact. So I suppose, summing up our learning around SQE, employers are starting to actively shape the proposition they want and are looking for collaboration in this space. The SQE is an exam that has its critics, and many questions remain unclear as to its impact until actually it's run a couple of iterations. However, employers do seem to be starting to focus on the opportunity SQE gives to change the training regime, to make it more effective for them, to provide access, and to meet this appetite among future lawyers themselves for flexibility and value. I hope that was helpful. Thanks, Aisha. I'm now happy to hand over to Bhavisha.
Thanks very much, Giles. We've got Bhavisha. Great. Over to you, Bhavisha.
Hi. So as Aisha mentioned, I'm Bhavisha Mistry, and I am currently General Counsel and Company Secretary for a pharmaceutical group called Mawdsleys. I've been in-house for about 6 years. Prior to my role at Mawdsleys, I was General Counsel and Company Secretary for a fashion brand called Misguided. So two very different industries. And then prior to that, I was in private practice for a law firm called Waitmans. And I trained at Waitmans and qualified into their corporate and commercial department. And I suppose my career, I suppose it wasn't planned as such to go in-house. It sort of happened just off the, by the off chance. So I'll start from the very beginning. I chose to do a law degree. I did it at the University of Leeds, and I chose law because I thought it would be a really interesting subject, nothing like I'd done before. I thought it would be a good degree. If I wanted to become a lawyer, great. If I didn't, it would still stand me in good stead for other roles. So I started the degree with, I suppose, absolutely no sort of detailed background as to the role of a solicitor or a barrister. I had no family or friends that were lawyers. It was something completely new to me. So obviously when I started to read case law and legislation, it was a shock to the system, I suppose. So something completely new, nothing like I'd done before. Nevertheless, it was really enjoyable, and I sort of from that point became very passionate about a career in law. And the University of Leeds was very good for me. It you know, set up lots of different presentations from law firms that we could attend, law firms, and also sessions with barristers as well. So we really got a good insight into what it would be like to go down the solicitor route or the barrister route. And I chose the solicitor route, I suppose, after going to those presentations and then doing some work experience. So in my summer holidays, and I used to go and work for a local law firm, and I suppose that really gave me a good practical experience of what it would be like on a day-to-day basis and the types of skills that I would need. And that was essential for me as someone with no background in law, no friends or family to support me. The best thing for me was getting into a law firm and understanding, you know, the skills that would be required. And that takes me to the next point. So after the law degree, I did the legal practice course. And for me, you know, I absolutely enjoyed the legal practice course. It again gave me a very practical experience of what I would be doing on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, it's not the same as doing it in practice. So I was still keen to get that knowledge and experience. And when I finished the legal practice course, I suppose straight after doing my exams, I got my training contract at Waitman's, and which is the best thing for me ever, after, you know, a long slog of completing training contract applications to get that news that I'd secured a training contract and could be on my way towards qualification was just the best thing for me. So even after I completed the legal practice course, I took on a paralegal role, because at that time training contracts were given 2 years in advance. So I had to wait 2 years to start my training contract. But again, for me, rather than taking a gap year and going traveling around the world, which is obviously a lovely thing to do, I wanted to start building my knowledge and my experience. And I had started to work for a law firm called Halliwell's as a paralegal. And I suppose where I'm going to with this is, for me, to become a good lawyer, you need both the knowledge and the practical experience. So what I like about the new approach with the SQE is the fact that it gives you the flexibility to work and to study at the same time, and really make the most of it. So places like the College of Legal Practice give you that extra flexibility. It also, you know, the cost of it, so you can work and pay for it, and it helps that the cost is far lower than what I paid for the legal practice course, or should I say my mum and dad, because no, I would not have been able to pay a £10,000 course with my own funds at that stage. I had to come straight out of university. So I think it's really helpful that there are these new approaches in terms of the cost of the course, and also the flexibility to do it in a way that suits you. And I suppose when I did the legal practice course, you know, I was single, I had no dependents. But again, if you do have children, for example, this flexible approach the college is proposing is really useful. So the other thing I like about the SQE and what the college is proposing is the fact that the course is going to be more tailored to what is needed in practice. And from my perspective as an in-house lawyer, again, when I moved from private practice to in-house, there's a completely new set of skills that you need to acquire. You need better soft skills, you know, the ability to tailor your advice and speak to different people and understand how you need to deliver your advice to suit them. You know, the fact that you need to be commercially minded and really get to know the business and the people that you're dealing with. So I would hope that the SQE and the places like the College of Legal Practice and other providers will really tailor the course to take these additional skills into account. And I suppose the final piece is making sure that the course is accessible and the profession is accessible. For going back to what I was saying about my background, I had no friends or family in the legal profession. It really was up to me to develop my knowledge and experience and put myself in a position where I could be just as good as those that did have that background and knowledge and family support, I suppose. I felt like I had to, you know, go that extra mile, do that extra work experience, go to all these different things to build my knowledge and experience. And the main thing, my confidence, because right at the beginning, I suppose I lacked confidence because I thought everyone else was better than me. They had a better chance than me. So making these courses more accessible to people like me that didn't have that background, and also the funding points, you know, that don't necessarily have lots of funds to pay for a course. I think for me, the SQE is a way forward of tackling those issues, and places like the College of Legal Practice can really help with making the course and the profession a lot more accessible. You know, the worst thing for me was I'd asked my parents to help fund the legal practice course, but there was absolutely no guarantee that I would get a training contract and qualify. So, you know, that was always at the back of my mind, and a huge pressure on me. So I think having a course that is accessible and takes those things into account, I think that is a huge change and a change for the better.
Great, thanks very much for sharing your career story with us, Bhavisha. I'm going to ask you to hop off for now and make way for Susan to deliver her talk. We'll be back for the Q&A, and I just wanted to point out and remind all of you watching to leave any comments or questions you have for Bhavisha and our other speakers in the chat sidebar. I can see we have Susan now, so over to you, Susan, to deliver your talk.
Thanks so much, Aisha. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the introduction earlier. I've been asked just to say a little bit about Accutrainee and what we do, which will hopefully give a bit of insight as to why I'm actually sitting on this great panel here today. Accutrainee is a tech-enabled, flexible resourcing provider to the legal industry. We launched an award-winning business model nearly 10 years ago now, with the aim of helping individuals reach qualification through our bespoke training contracts. Throughout the last 10 years, we've actually been placing trainee solicitors into a mixture of up to 4 different law firms or in-house legal teams, effectively delivering the equivalent, in structural terms anyway, the equivalent to qualifying work experience. So we already have a lot of experience in supporting and developing junior lawyers in this very specific way. The way we do that is we employ paralegals and trainees and second them out to a wide range of organisations. But during that process, what we're doing is closely monitoring and assessing what the trainees are doing. We're assessing the competency that they're acquiring, offering them mentoring, core skills training, and crucially, opportunities for them just to stop and reflect and to learn from their experiences and hopefully learn from any mistakes that they make as well. So over the years, we've placed a very large number of trainees in-house, many of whom have gone on to qualify into those organisations. And that's given us some great insight in terms of what works well for both the trainees and the companies. If I turn now to the SQE, obviously we're all on a really exciting journey here together, with the SQE promising to deliver some significant advantages to the legal industry. It's very clear that the SQE is going to open up the profession. I think it's clear that there will be much higher levels of consistency demonstrated for those entering the profession, which can only be a really positive thing. There are, however, 1 or 2 things that perhaps leave me a little bit more on the fence than some others around whether the benefits that we're going to gain will outweigh some of the potential or possible risks that might be lurking their heads around the corner. Now, I really hope that the SQE is going to do what we need it to do for diversity and for quality. But I think in order for that to happen, I do believe that professionals and legal service providers have a role in really stepping up and, in some instances where necessary, going beyond what the SRA is telling us is needed. Now, I think the fantastic news and the great news, and as we've just all seen demonstrated by Giles as well, is that we're seeing loads of evidence of academic institutions, law firms, in-house legal teams, all coming forward with exciting, innovative ideas to ensure that our future lawyers will venture into their careers with the tools that they need to deliver client service. But I guess my concerns are much more around looking at things purely from a graduate's perspective. And I want to stress that by graduate here, I'm not talking about future trainees that I know will be extremely well cared for in the many organizations that are represented and attending here today. I'm actually talking much more about the graduates who perhaps wouldn't ordinarily get a training contract, who, for all intents and purposes, will, going forward, be putting their training contract or qualifying work experience together themselves, given that that role of a training establishment will be falling away. Now, for them, I do think it is possible that what they're being told they need to do in order to just pass and to qualify may end up falling short of what they actually need in order to have a happy, fulfilling, and successful career. Now, we all know that there are a very, very wide range of experiences out there. We all know of circumstances of paralegals getting some fabulous experience, real breadth of work, a supervisor that's very dedicated to them, a team that's really dedicated to their progress and development. And sometimes those paralegals are often working at a level that is far higher than what you'd expect a paralegal to be doing. But conversely, we also know that there are lots of experiences out there, whether it's for a paralegal, a legal intern, a legal analyst, whatever the role might call them, where actually the polar opposite to that is true. You know, they may not have much variety in the types of things that they're being asked to do. They may be lucky to have a supervisor, but that supervisor may be responsible for 20 or 30 other paralegals and not have the time that's needed to dedicate to that individual. They may not be in an organization that's really committed to their development. And that's not through any cynical or nasty reason. It's purely because that organization has brought them in to do a very distinct, finite role. And I think, so what sort of slightly concerns me with regards to the SQE is that we're sort of finding this position where suddenly we're looking at these sort of two polar experiences, and we're saying, okay, these two things are entirely equal now. And that does worry me a little bit. Of course, I do appreciate that we have the safeguard in place that everybody needs to pass SQE Part 2, but then, you know, we also have to question why and how, as again was mentioned earlier here with Giles' sort of front-loading method, why and how someone can pass Part 2 without potentially having done even a day's worth of work experience. So Part 2 is not assessing the real life experiences that benefit, and we see benefit our trainees on a day-to-day basis. It's not assessing or testing that part of the process that so many declared to be the jewel in the crown of our legal qualification process. Now, you know, okay, training contracts have never really been assessed at the end point. People have gone through the training contract and qualified. But the really crucial difference here is that that overarching organization, which has had responsibility and accountability to those people, is also falling away. So if Part 2 is not assessing qualifying work experience, it does sort of beg the question, what is QWE doing then? What is it for in this new qualification route? And my own view is that it's going to play an extremely important role in paving the way for someone's NQ position and future career. Because employers, of course, are going to be faced with a large number of individuals who have all passed and demonstrated the same skills and passed the same exam. So, of course, an employer is going to be asking, okay, now tell me what you actually did before qualification so I can work out what you can do post-qualification, or what training I might need to give you to be able to get you to that level. But the experiences that they are going to be looking at, in most cases, will be a candidate's qualifying work experience. But the criteria for qualifying work experience is actually very broad. It's, you know, the experience which enables an individual to develop some, possibly even just one, or all of the competencies set out in the Statement of Solicitor's Competence. Now that covers a lot of different types of work experience. And the SRA has, with this, you know, quite frankly, unenviable mammoth task it's had on pushing forward and taking forward this new qualification route, has set forward some very helpful guidance on actually what good QWE should look like. However, if I've understood things correctly, there is also with that guidance a slight undertone for professionals to say, but look, we are expecting you to confirm the QWE provided it satisfied the criteria. Now that's not provided it satisfied the criteria for good QWE, it's that it satisfied the criteria. So I think that might mean that some individuals who don't have an overarching training establishment taking care of them may end up completing QWE in the way that they're told is acceptable, but actually isn't very good. And so although they qualify, they may be sitting there wondering why they can't secure an NQ position. So I think we do need to have a think about how we avoid the creation of a new bottleneck that's moved that bottleneck from securing an elusive training contract to actually securing an elusive NQ position. And my own personal view is that we can mitigate that risk. And the way we do that is actually ensuring that there is a lot more prescription and rigor and requirement around what qualifying work experience should look like. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm now going to invite Dan Kayne to deliver his talk. Brilliant. Over to you, Dan.
Hi, thanks very much, and thanks for having me. And great to hear from the speakers beforehand. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the O-shaped lawyer, and having had 20 or so years in practice, 8 of which were in private practice, and then since then as an in-house lawyer, hopefully I can give a broad perspective on my view of the SQE and how it relates to what we're doing with the O-shaped lawyer. So the O-shaped lawyer is a movement of a GC-led movement. So the General Counsel started it. I brought together a group of General Counsel a couple of years ago, believing very strongly that my experience within the profession was that we were a profession focused far too much on technical and academic excellence and insufficient support for a range of other skills, what people may refer to as soft skills. I'll call more like people skills because they're very hard to achieve, that really would create this well-rounded individual, hence the O for the O-shape. I started to talk to peers about my thinking around the technical and its imbalance with the broader skill sets. And we interviewed 18 of the leading general counsel in the UK, and the response was overwhelming from them, really giving validation to what we were saying about this over-reliance on technical and academic excellence. And they broadly said 3 things, and there's a report which is available on our website that I would encourage people to look at in more detail, but they broadly said 3 things. One is that legal technical knowledge is table stakes. That gets you to the conversation. But the really great lawyers are able to go from there to be able to add value to their business, ultimately create value for those businesses they're advising. Now, in order to get there, they need to have a range of other skills, these more human-centric skills that will enable them to move from being really smart people who have got great academics to those who understand business, understand their customers, and are able then, as a result of that, to create value for them. Now, we've got some quotes there from what the GC said, and interestingly, one of them said that law schools should be teaching how a business works, and they said, and soft skills, and I would say that that's people skills. From that, we were able to distill down the interviews into a series of different competencies, or attributes as we've called them, around what the O-shaped lawyer would look like. Bear in mind, technical is still incredibly important, so nothing I'm saying is suggesting it's not. But we're looking at skills that are around how you build relationships effectively. You know, the skills required in communication and collaboration in order to do that effectively. Emotional intelligence. We're looking at how we can have lawyers create value. So how they're able to look for opportunities and take ownership of issues and see them through from start to finish. And finally, we're looking at how lawyers need to be adaptable. In the changing landscape that is the legal profession, adaptability and flexibility are words we'll hear a lot about. Now that's where I come to the SQE and the potential for flexibility and adaptability to play its part. When I first started talking about the O-shaped lawyer a couple of years ago, I looked at the LPC course and saw that it was exactly the same in terms of its syllabus than when I did it 20-something years ago. And that was a bit of a shock to me, thinking just how much society had moved on and how much the legal industry was being disrupted. And it felt completely alien that we were still teaching lawyers to be lawyers for the last generation and not thinking about what it would look like for the next generation. And it was at that point that I became aware of the SQE. Now, the SQE, I think, brings some of the benefits that you've heard in terms of potentially opening up the profession. But I think when it comes to the skills that the general counsel, the in-house lawyers, and I stress the buyers of legal services, we shouldn't forget that customers have a key role to play here. It doesn't go anywhere near addressing the skills gaps that we've been talking about. And I think after many years of consultation and getting to a place where we have a regulated SQE, I think that's a massive missed opportunity. But with missed opportunities, I think there is the groundwork laid for a different type of opportunity, because the SQE also allows the law schools to have white space that they can then bring in some of these skills and embed them into the programs that they have, or separately, to ensure that we bring these skills to life that will turn a good lawyer into a great lawyer. And as we move into the next generation, these wider skills are going to be more important than ever. COVID has shown that there is far more to the role of a lawyer than just being able to dispense legal advice. This relationship with people, this understanding how you are dispensing advice, the how rather than what, is becoming incredibly important. Just to give you an example of some of the work that we're doing, we're looking and talking to many of the law schools. We're also talking to universities. And I think one of the questions I've seen pop up is, what's this difference between in-house and private practice when it comes to skills? When I spoke to one university, I saw their LLB course and I looked at their business studies course. And I said to the dean of the law school, I said, in all honesty, with everything else being equal, if you offered me a graduate from the business school and from the law school, assuming all things equal, I would hands down every time choose the graduate from the business studies school. Because there were so many skills that they were being taught around entrepreneurship, leadership, diversity, that these are skills that the law degrees just haven't even got near, because we've been so focused on technical legal excellence, and it's at the expense of a whole host of other skills that make people far more employable. So what we've been really pushing hard with the law schools as part of our O-shaped program is to work closely with them to bring these skills to life. You know, if you've got in-house lawyers asking their law firms to say, we want to work with lawyers that have this range of skills, then we have an opportunity for law firms who ultimately pay a huge amount of money to law schools to start help influencing the curricula of law schools. This is a gap that needs to be filled. And it's not one that you just need to rely on me saying, or even the 18 general counsel saying, or even the broader community of general counsel that we're engaged with and law firms are engaged with. But a recent study was done by the Global League of Law Schools, which brings together the most progressive law schools, I think, around the country, around the world. And they did a survey recently that was looking at a blueprint for global legal education. And they identified a number of key trends where there were gaps, one of which was skills. And when we talk about skills, they have a whole range of things, but these softer skills I'll use for this purpose, but the human-centric skills were very high up on that agenda. What this means is that the SQE introduction presents an opportunity for the UK law schools to take a leading role globally here. Other law schools around the world are looking quite keenly on how we are going to approach and implement a new system of education. For us to look at it and simply do the same that we've always done, but perhaps, as I say, open it up to more people, but give more people the same that we've always done, would be a massive missed opportunity. And I really reach out and call out to in-house teams, to law firms and to law schools to seize this opportunity. Recently, I attended a Legal Geek conference where Richard Susskind, people may be familiar with the name, but a very big commentator, well-known and writer within the legal profession. And he said that those law schools that were introducing different programs around the world around these skills turned out to be the most popular alternative programs. We know there's an appetite for people to develop these skills because they aren't just for now, they're forever. And they're also skills that will enable those who choose to do something else, whether that's private practice, in-house, or a different industry, will gain a huge amount from, whatever they decide. Now, I think there are huge barriers when it comes to making changes in the legal profession. I've already mentioned there was an extensive consultation period. Our profession moves far too slowly. And yet, when you're presented with an opportunity like this, speed is of the essence. There are still too many people, I think, at the moment when it comes to the SQE who are really unsure about what to do. And there'll be occasions where we end up just doing what we've done. And I think Susan's highlighting this risk of having SQE1, SQE2 just done immediately and go back into an old form training contract that will just simply, I think, exacerbate the problems that we've got. So again, I reach out to those who have the ability to influence this, and in many respects that's from in-house to law firms to law schools, to say this is a once in a generation opportunity, let's not lose it. So finally, just to try and conclude, what are we doing with the program that I hope will bring about this change? Well, as I say, we're engaging with law schools across the country. We're actually engaging with the Global League of Law Schools too, because we see that this is something that we can lead the way on. We have a vision that every lawyer everywhere will be able to realize their potential, and that will lead to a more engaged, more inclusive and happier, healthier profession. We've got so many challenges in our profession right now, and for me, many of them are derived from the fact that we have set ourselves up to be a knowledge dispenser, provide legal advice and draw the line there. When we bring about a profession that's culture from the start, from law schools and even as back as university, that recognizes the value of these broader skills, we will start to address from the bottom up some of the ills that the legal profession currently suffers with, whether that's well-being or diversity. But we need the whole system to buy into this. And yes, we've got a very influential group of people supporting and endorsing what we do. But if people recognize that these skills are valuable, then we do have the ability to make that change happen. And that's why I think the SQE is a fabulous opportunity, despite some of the limitations that you've heard already. And delighted, I think, to take any questions that may come up. But back to you, Aisha, and perhaps the rest of the group for the chat.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Dan, and to all of our speakers for their great talks. I'm going to invite the speakers back on stage now as we're going to move on to the audience Q&A. Just click share audio and video, which should appear at the top of your screens. Brilliant. So we're going to kick off with a question for Susan. And that's, so Susan, for almost a decade now, you've been sort of running a model where trainees get a variety of experience at different organizations throughout the training contracts. And I just thought maybe you could shed light on what the delegates here today can sort of learn from Accutrainee as they develop new pathways under SQE.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key things that a lot of our trainees end up benefiting from is the adaptability that they acquire through going through our training program. Obviously, it's very typical where you have a trainee in a law firm and they may go off to an in-house organization for a 6-month period. But that mindset, the whole process of that is that they're going to come back to that law firm, and that's where they're looking to qualify. I think where our trainees do have, I don't want to, whether you call it an advantage, is they, in today's world where we are seeing the need for much more agility, much more movement, more adaptability, trainees can from a very young age learn to understand what it's like and what it means to get into different organizations, to work with different cultures, to work with different people, different processes, and particularly when they're working in-house, understanding what are the needs of that business. But actually, when they're very well embedded into it, recognizing that this may be something that will become their future career. So the variety, I think, of exposure is really important. And I caveat that with, you will always get people who come to this process very clear in the knowledge of what it is they want to do. And that's fantastic. If they've thought it through and they understand and they've had some previous experience and they know that there's a particular area that is right for them, great, get more exposure into that area. Consider, of course, the things that Dan's been talking about, those wider skills that are so important and have been missing in our profession until now. And so it's a really fantastic opportunity, these sort of formative years, to explore and to understand and to ask questions and have that support behind you. And so, of course, I think, do things to use that to its best advantage.
Great, thanks for that, Susan. And coming to you, Dan, for this next question. So you mentioned that SQE is a missed opportunity to teach students more business-friendly soft skills that may help them sort of function better in a commercial setting. And I wondered if you could explain why that is and how educators can sort of fill that white space, as you described it, with the O-shaped lawyer group or otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. I think it is a missed opportunity because I think what I'm seeing, and there'll be people who are listening and on the panel who are far more expert in terms of what that contains, but my impression is that it's very similar to the LPC in terms of regulated content, but perhaps with slightly less material involved. And what that means to me is we've effectively done what we've always done, but taken a slightly different approach, whether that's cost and whether that is the QWE idea. We're essentially teaching the same things. So I think from that point of view, we're in a world that's very different now from 1993 when the LPC was started. And to think that 30 years have passed, that you look at all the different movements socially and globally, you look at how the profession has been disrupted by technology, by diversity over the last 2 decades, and yet it's not even been given a nod when it comes to the regulatory element of the new legal education. It's absurd to me, if I'm being honest. So what I'm saying is what it has done is it's left a gap. But that gap, I hope, will be filled because this white space gives people, every law school, the opportunity to say, actually, we need to reflect much more what society is about now. We need to reflect the fact that these skills are important. And the O-shaped skills that we're talking about, they are skills that are these human-centric skills. So I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that we've created a whole host of new skills. What we've done is produce a model that brings them together in a holistic way that allows people to develop them, knowing full well that it's come from the buyers of services that say these are vital. So I think that's where I look at it as both a missed opportunity, but in the same breath, I say, what a fabulous opportunity now to listen to what customers want and bring it into the new SQE system.
I think Liz Rutter from BPP agrees with you there, Dan, in the chat. So coming to you, Giles, bringing you into the discussion now, just wondered, how is the college sort of planning to bridge this skills gap and prepare students for the world of work?
Thanks, Aisha. I think, picking up on Dan's comments, the SQE is a gateway assessment, both on functional legal knowledge and skills. You can, however, wrap around that in that sort of white space we referred to, a series of modules which really take future trainees into the skills and into the technical knowledge that they'll need to actually complete a really good QWE, back to Susan's earlier point. So I think the college, what we're looking at is really much a flexible delivery of modules around those skills and those technical areas, what we call transactional modules, that would wrap around the SQE assessments themselves and actually fill what gap Dan identifies correctly as, how do you bring a future trainee to perform really well in the QWE and to get a really worthwhile experience before they qualify? That's where we're targeting our wraparound modules, as we call them. But also, I think the key thing is collaborating with employers' organizations with what they need. What actually do they need in their business, rather than just saying, here are 3 electives, a la LPC, take them or leave them. So I think the colleges, we're very much in that collaborative space where we want to be able to provide what the profession really needs going forward, not what it's always had.
Great, thanks, Giles. And Bhavisha, you touched on the skills gap briefly in your talk. So having worked in both private practice and now in-house, and your hope that training providers tailor their SQE courses to take into account certain skills that you found from your own experience were missing in your transition to an in-house legal team. So I just wondered whether you could expand on what skills you thought were missing.
Yeah,
how we can plug those.
I suppose I agree with Dan in terms of the types of skills, the people skills. I think in terms of whether the training providers can assist with that, if I go back to the beginning again, personally, I feel like I had all of the soft skills before I embarked upon a legal career. And then through that training process, I feel like I turned into a lawyer and not a people person, and someone that people in business can relate to and deal with. So essentially what I'm saying is, I think the way that we trained lawyers, you know, especially when I was training, was to create this kind of different type of person that when I moved into in-house, realized people don't really like dealing with. So, you know, for example, the things that get mentioned about lawyers is, they're too formal, they overcomplicate everything, they're too risk averse, they're not entrepreneurial. You know, you try and speak to them, they're boring, they've got no personality. So when we're talking about soft skills, we're talking about that, the ability to be a normal person and speak like you would do if you were outside of work. So, you know, understanding people, you know, figuring out what makes people tick, both professionally, but also on a personal level, build that relationship with them. We're talking about how does that individual like things to be communicated to them? Some people like short answers, other people like detail. And again, it goes back to building that relationship and figuring people out. The other thing is, you know, being commercial. So yes, your role as a lawyer to identify risk and advise upon that, but be pragmatic about it. So what is the business trying to achieve, and balance the risks against that, and help them to understand, well, actually, this might be a risk worth taking. So it's that ability to act like you would do in your own sort of personal environment, I would say. And I think the SQE and the ability, places like the College of Legal Practice are working hard to try and bridge that gap and try and make the training course suitable and incorporate those types of skills. I think it's fundamental that we don't train lawyers to be different types of people. We try to train them on the knowledge and the experience, but let them have a personality. I think my experience in private practice was you tended to have to be this certain type of person, you know, like certain, you know, have certain types of hobbies. You couldn't talk about certain topics because you might not be seen as a lawyer. And you know, when you go in-house, you realize that goes against you. People want to speak to someone they can relate to. And I give a silly example, but this, you know, when I worked at Misguided, for example, the talk was all about things like that Love Island and Kim Kardashian. Now, if I tried to talk about Love Island or Kim Kardashian in a law firm, you know, I'd be snubbed with, you know, you're not professional or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. So what that example is trying to say, you know, be a normal person, try and build relationships and try and understand what makes people tick. And I think that's what, going back to Dan's point about he would rather choose someone from business school. I think in business school, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, you know, building relationships. What, you know, if you want somebody to do something, you know, motivate them in some way, you know, give them something that they want. And I think that those kind of skills are vital when you're an in-house lawyer. And equally in private practice, I think external lawyers, when we're instructing external lawyers, need to understand what their clients want as well. And it's not necessarily this formal, you know, long-winded, risk-averse advice. It's, you know, something a bit more pragmatic.
Can I just come into that, Aisha? Because I mean, Bhavisha just summed it up beautifully there. I mean, what a sad indictment of our profession that we take people who have all these skills and we turn them into something that's more akin to a robot. And you're bang on, and you've articulated it wonderfully. It's a sad truth that happens. And so why are we then allowing these fabulous people that come into the profession, and we're not enabling them to share and use all of this wealth of talent that they have, that might not necessarily only be technical legal? These are people with incredible skill sets more broadly that we just need to help them develop and practice and recognize there's value in it. And I can't wait to see the day when we see people promoted, retained, recruited, both because they're intelligent with their IQ, but also because they're very high up on the EQ scale, that emotional intelligence. That for me is where we've got to head. Bhavisha's bang on. What we're doing about diversity in the profession is we are stifling it by effectively creating the same type of person who is going to be successful through the profession. So thank you, Bhavisha, for sharing that. It's bang on my experience too.
It's also bang on in Laura Pinkney's experience. She's come in the chat saying that she totally agrees with you, Bhavisha. When she was working in private practice, it was nice that clients said to her that she was so grateful that she was a normal person. So that's nice to see. So for this next question, I thought we'd come back to you, Giles, and looking more broadly now in what could potentially be a very fluid SQE environment. I just wondered whether you think we need to reimagine the idea of law schools and maybe look upon them as flexible learning partners rather than just a place where students go to learn.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think Dan's touched on it. I think that in a law degree, sometimes, unfortunately, things are hammered out of a future lawyer rather than put in. And I think they can be spaces with much more communication with industry, much more ability to put into the courses, both undergraduate and postgraduate, that sort of focus. And it's valuing the holistic lawyer. It's valuing what you can give as a law student and the experience you get. So Susan's model is a great one in terms of the variety of experience that her organization provides. And I think with law schools, the difficulty is that often you have a degree of structures around the school within a university environment which may well inhibit development and change of curricula. So I think one of the things about SQE, whether you love it or hate it, is it's going to force people to actually think about, well, what are we teaching to here? If there are gaps around SQE, we want to make sure that here and now we can start the sort of discussions around the rounded lawyer, around the skills that you need. So that when you come out of law school, you're not presented with this model lawyer that Bhavisha mentions, which is a horror, really, but you're presented with something more rounded, and you're encouraged as an undergraduate, as a postgraduate, to develop that rounded nature and skills and technical skills as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Giles. So this final question I have for the panel actually ties in with our poll question, and you'll find this under session in tab 2. And I thought it'd be good to sort of get the audience's view before I come to the speakers on this. And the question we're asking is, will in-house teams play a greater role in the training of lawyers under the SQE? And the options are yes, new, more flexible system will see companies take a major new training role. There may be a slight increase over time, but it won't be a game changer. The third option is there will be no change. And the fourth and final option is the SQE will make students even more inclined to train in law firms. So cast your votes now, please, delegates. And you do have to vote in order to view the results. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Right, so looks like the first option has come out on top. New, more flexible system will see companies take a major new training role. Speakers, what do you make of that?
Can I go first with that, Aisha? I mean, I really, really hope so. The last 10 years, obviously, the legal industry's changed massively. When I trained, you didn't train in-house. It wasn't done. There was, I think, one organization that did it. One of the key successes we've had is introducing trainees in-house, both because it makes complete sense for an in-house organization now, given the changes in how they're working, to look at talent acquisition, to look at succession planning, to look at how they're developing their own future lawyers. And it also makes complete sense from a graduate's perspective. We get so many candidates applying to us knowing they want to train in-house. The responsibilities and the variety of work that our in-house trainees get, and that ability to really understand their client, their risk appetite, the reasons why they want to do things, is so exciting. I mean, I've always said if I did my training contract again now, I would want to do it in-house. That's not to say I didn't enjoy my training contract in private practice. I did, I loved it, but it's really opened my eyes up to that level of involvement that the lawyers can be having with the decision makers. And as Dan's saying, you know, and then there's a kind of almost leap over to them being the decision makers, to them offering those suggestions and recommendations of what an organization can do, as opposed to saying, yep, you could do this, and it's now no longer my problem. You know, and depending on, you know, what kind of person you are, I find that really, really exciting. So I hope that through this flexibility in the opening up of the market, I really hope lots of in-house teams do want to do this. They have the ability, they have the, you know, they have the know-how there, and we all know there are lots of individuals who are desperate to get those skills and to learn those skills and to gain those experiences. So fingers crossed that will happen.
I mean, just if I can jump in, Aisha, on that, I think there's one major barrier to this. I agree with Susan, it'd be great, and I hope it does happen, but not many in-house teams have trainees. And if they do, there's a very small number of trainees. In-house teams, the buyers, I keep saying the customers, weren't really part of the consultation process for the SQE. There was no particular involvement. It's still seen by too many as a kind of area for has-been lawyers or lawyers that couldn't make it in big law. I think there needs to be a real shift in terms of mindset about the role that in-house teams can and should play as they become bigger and more sophisticated. I think they'll get fabulous training. We've had 2 trainees in the last 2 years. They'll get incredible training. They'll get real life training. But until students come through who still see that it's all about suits or whatever else is the big thing on telly at the moment, that you have to go to big law to be a success in the profession, we're going to have a real problem in persuading people coming through that in-house is a viable option. And also we need to persuade in-house that the SQE could be an opportunity for them, because they just simply don't know about it. Ask any GC about their thoughts on the SQE. Apart from Bhavisha and I have been on this, very few would know about it.
Aisha, I think just to come in on what Dan's saying, you're right, Dan, we're talking to in-house teams for the first time, and they are going right back to basics and saying, well, what is this all about? To echo Susan's comment, though, we've got candidates coming on our first SQE course in August from in-house, and just talking to them, they are fabulously prepared, and they are well-rounded, and I think it's a very encouraging route. So like Susan, I'd say hopefully the poll is correct and we do have a development of training in that area.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. So I'm conscious of time, so we're going to wrap up here. Do any of the speakers have any final thoughts they'd like to share with delegates? No? Well,
can I just quickly say, if there are any candidates out there that are looking to qualify, you know, what we do recognise that this is an incredibly confusing process, and there's a lot of unanswered questions at this point. So we've sought to try and offer a lot of answers to those questions with an AI platform that we'll be launching in a couple of weeks' time. So if, you know, to help them navigate essentially the qualification route. So if that's of interest, please, you know, visit our website and register for that.
And finally, from me, Aisha, we're often accused in the profession of using Latin terminology, and we shouldn't do, but I am going to use it. I would say it's carpe diem right now. Seize that opportunity that exists, because these things do not come around too often, and we are on the cusp of something potentially pretty special. Let's not waste it.